Sean and I have been sort of dancing around each other on the internet forever. We have a bajillion mutual friends, and eventually we were here tooting at each other enough that we were like, let's meet in real life. And we like compared knives and talked about the old days. And I was like, hey, I'm doing this conference. Come talk about your, like, you traveled around the world, first year of Ripley's life, right? First year. And he's like, cool, I'll do that. And then like the week before or whatever, they started what was then called RDTN, now called Savecast, about sort of crowdsourcing radiation measurements, specifically after the earthquake and tsunami in Japan, right? Okay, so do you have any devices this time?
Yeah, but...
Okay. So anyhow, so Sean Bonner, about Savecast.
Hi. So yeah, I sort of like to assume that everyone knows every detail of what I'm working on, but I guess that doesn't always work. So a little bit of backstory is, as Shane said, right before the first Farmhouse Conf, there was this earthquake and this resulting nuclear issue in Japan. Nobody knew what was going on, and so so I and a bunch of friends, some folks at the hackerspace in Tokyo, and other folks sort of got together and realized that. It's a much longer story, but we started collecting measurements and publishing them because nobody else was taking any of these readings. The government was publishing unreliable information. Nobody could get any information. We figured that a bunch of hackers who didn't care about asking permission if they could do a bunch of stuff, we could get this done. And so that's what I talked about at the first Farmhouse Conf. We had really sort of just gotten things going at that point, and it was kind of interesting because people were trying to get information, and we were trying to figure out how to provide this information. We didn't quite know how long we were going to be able to do it. And so one of the very first things we did was we decided that we were going to measure schools, because we figured if nothing else, we'll measure schools, then we'll have the data about the schools, and who's going to complain about taking measurements to find out whether the kids are safe or not. So that was our initial thought when we first went out in the field and started taking measurements. And it turns out that the schools were actually the people who would complain about that. And so they were like, you can't come here and take measurements, because what happens if you find something? Then we have to do something about it. And so that was a big thing for us to sort of wrap our head around, that people would prefer not to know rather than find out actual information that they could do something about. That was a very short-lived problem, because the whole radiation thing didn't just go away the next day. And so, coming up on 2 years later, that's totally changed. We get invites from schools all the time. We do universities, organizations, all sorts of stuff. We just published our 4 millionth data point. In comparison, the Japanese government just published their 20,000th data point. So we've done a bit, covered a lot of ground on that, and we're going global with it, and data from all over the world. But in this, we sort of started realizing that we weren't that radiation wasn't the only thing that people didn't know about. There's all this stuff around us, and we assume somebody's paying attention to it, but we don't really know. And then if we try to go find it, it's really hard to find. And so the thing that was the closest correlation turned out to be air quality. And so over the past few months, we've been looking at how we can take the systems that we've built for measuring radiation and providing all of that data for people to measure air quality as well. And it's funny because we're sort of running into the same sort of issues with air that we were with radiation, in that it's reported in these really vague ways that are kind of useless for people, but it seems like somebody's doing something. And the kind of old guard that's charged with this, I don't know if I want to publicly shame any organizations, but there's a bunch of environmental organizations that everybody here knows about, and people probably donate to and stuff, who are supposed to be, they talk about how they're taking care of all this stuff, and they're totally not. When we talk to these groups, we're like, oh hey, we're gonna get crowdsource, we're gonna get all these people, look at what we did with radiation, we're gonna start doing this stuff with air quality, and they're like, we already do that, you don't need to do anything. And we're like, well, where's the data? And they're like, well, we have it locked up, and well, we published a report, so you can read the report. We're like, well, can we see the actual data? And they're like, no. And we're like, well, okay, well, how do people, if I want to know, the air quality in the city, how can we go find this stuff? And they're like, well, you don't need to worry about that because we measured it 10 years ago and it's done. So, you know, you need to stop doing this. Hey, check it out. And so we sort of feel like when like the old guard who's in charge of stuff, like it's like freaked out and tells us that we shouldn't be like looking at what they're doing, that's probably a pretty good sign. So yeah, we just got some funding from the Knight Foundation, and so the next big step is we're going to start measuring all this air quality stuff and publish a bunch of air quality data. So you can check out what we're doing at safecast.org, but it's been a pretty exciting 2 years. Okay, yeah. Shane.
Thank you, Shane. I'll stick around for a second. I have a couple questions for you too.
So, is all of your data on GitHub?
All of our code's on GitHub. Yes. The code's on GitHub. The data, we have an API. We publish like CSV files. We publish all sorts of the data. We publish pretty much every place possible. But the code for all the projects is all open. It's all on GitHub. We have like long growing issues list. So if anybody wants to jump in and help on stuff, it's all on GitHub, and we could use help figuring out bits and pieces. All the data is CC0. It's open. Anybody can grab it. You can take it. You can build new visualizations. You can do whatever you want with it. Check it out.
What's the GitHub URL?
I don't know. Go to GitHub and search for Safecast.
So CC0, for anyone who doesn't know, is Creative Commons, basically Creative Commons public domain license.
Yeah,
it's
there's
like,
no restrictions. You can use it without even attribution. Like no
Mama,
barrier.
sit down, Mom.
Okay, thanks, John.
Cool. Thanks.
So we'll see you again in 6 months.
Yeah.